my name is Paul Demeda, and I am a holistic nutritionist. And as Elizabeth said, I am on staff here at IHN. I teach nutrition in the fundamentals. I've taught a lot of other courses here over the years, and fundamentals is the one that's the crux of everything. And so that's why I love teaching it. I'm happy to be here today because it's great to see so many people interested in nutrition, and I just love sharing good information. I'd like to start with sharing a little bit about myself. Would that be okay?
Yes.
Great. I started getting into nutrition about 15 years ago when I started getting sick. And I was really, really healthy. I was doing all kinds of sports and all kinds of activities, top of my game, but then things started to go bad. I started to get sensitive to chemicals. And first it was just perfumes and fragrances, and then it was laundry detergents. And this kept getting worse and worse and worse over time. I was actually doing lots of research, and my research was, what does the media say, what do the books say, and getting pieces here, there, and everywhere, and not really getting a full picture. This went on for 10 years, and I kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. I got to the point where being in a room like this would make me sick for weeks because of the carpet, the chemicals in the carpet, perfumes, and the soaps and things that people are wearing, the formaldehyde and the brand new clothes that everybody wears. All that stuff would make me sick. I went for 10 years, and at the end of 10 years, I ended up basically living in my basement. It was a modified clean room. And even then, if somebody cut the grass with a gas lawnmower, I'd be sick for days. I had migraines 3 to 5 days a week. I had no energy, lots of depression, and nothing was working. I remember waking up one morning and just knowing that I'd be dead in 2 months. And then something happened. I talked to a friend who met somebody who had the same thing I had and gone to a detox clinic in Halifax and came out a couple months later a lot better. So that's what I see. I had a subtle change in my perception at that point. I had been trying to live with my condition and in the environment that I was living in, and at that point I realized I need to turn my body around so that it can survive in the environment we live in. So I started looking into detox, and so I was on the web, and to this day I don't know why I never looked into detox before that, but after that one incident I started looking at detox, and some things kept coming up over and over and over again, is get off of wheat, dairy, and sugar. So wheat, dairy, and sugar, and I had nothing to lose, so I got off of wheat, dairy, and sugar. It wasn't easy, but I got off of it. And I remember waking up in the morning of the third day, and I looked around, and it was like I was looking through, actually it's like I had been looking through a veil for years, and suddenly it was gone. There's this fogginess that disappeared. I kept going with the detox, and after a week I realized I was losing weight, so I went to see my doctor. My doctor happened to be my 5th doctor, and happened to be the perfect doctor because she was very into integrative healthcare, the natural stuff and the medical stuff. And so after I saw her, I worked with her naturopath, and we did the right things in the right order, looking at the big picture, and in 6 months I was completely better. So 10 years, getting worse and worse and worse with no hope, going the alternative, or the holistic route, in 6 months completely better. So that kind of changed things for me. I did go back to work. I went back to work I worked in a high pressure design studio, and then one day I got a massive dose of that spray fantastic stuff, and ended up 4 hours later not being able to feel my arms, legs, having seizures in the hospital. After that I quit my job and signed up here. So that's how I came to IHN. I went through the most intensive year of my life, learned more than I have learned probably in the rest of my educational life, and went into practice immediately after and had lots of successes right away, which is really good. It was really good for somebody who wants to go to practice and have successes right off the bat. The interesting thing was the successes I were having were in things like heavy metal poisoning and cardiovascular disease, and big digestion was a big one. And these were all people who were rejected or failed by the medical system. So it's quite cool. So that's what I do. I do holistic nutrition. I have a practice at Davignon Digestive Health Center. I also have a practice at the Wellness Institute in Etobicoke, and I see clients also in Brampton at the Breakthrough Center. So I'm quite busy. I'm doing what I love doing, which is seeing people and helping them move on their path. And I also do lectures and seminars, and I have a whole series of seminars that I do, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Okay, enough about me. It's great that I get to see you here, because I see this upcoming generation of people who are going to be out there shifting the world. Now, what I like to do is find out if you guys know what the first step of learning is. First step of learning. Anybody want to?
Open-minded.
Open-minded, that's a good one.
Humility.
Humility. I thought of one. Sorry?
Wanting to learn.
Wanting to learn, those are good.
Eating properly.
Yeah, that'll help. It's not the first step, though.
Growing.
Growing.
Curiosity, discovering.
Curiosity, discovery. Those are all good. Those are all after the first step. The first step is showing up. So what I like to do, there's too many of you in the audience for me to do this, but I like you to find two people, give them a high five, and say, congratulations for showing up. Go ahead. Awesome. All right, so today we're going to talk about optimal nutrition or holistic nutrition for optimal health. This is one of the things I'm really passionate about, obviously, and I like to look at research and see what it tells me, and I compare that to common sense and what that tells me. And I like to do a lot of comparing to what we've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years, because we as species have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. So let's get started. So what we'll be talking about is what we need to be healthy and vibrant, things for energy, so nutrition, energy, make sure everything's working, physical and mental health, prevention of disease and aging. What I'm not going to be talking about is specific disease conditions. You're going to get a little of that in the next lecture. Things that are caused by medical depletions. Every time somebody takes a drug, they lose nutrients. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So every time somebody's on drugs, they are depleting nutrients in one way or another. And there's special needs for pregnancy. I'm not going to be talking about any of those right now. What I'm going to be talking about is that foundation, what everybody needs to stay healthy and be healthy. So what's nutrition? Nutrition is basically what we put in our bodies. Holistic nutrition is a bit bigger. It's also what we expose our minds to and things like that. But nutrition is what we put in our bodies, because that's what runs the machine. What are nutrients? Basically, nutrients are molecules. That's all they are. So everything in the body is made of molecules. That's what nutrients are. We use molecules to make protein. We use it to make fatty acids, and molecules make fatty acids. Molecules make enzymes. Enzymes do everything in the body. If you don't have enzymes, you don't move, you just lie there. DNA is made of molecules. So everything in the body is made of molecules. I'm going to show you a movie in a second, but every cell has a little wrapper around it, and that wrapper is made of molecules. These are all molecules. This is a protein, and these are fatty acids, and that's the wrapper around the cell. I'm going to talk about that a little more in a second. What I'm going to do now is show you a quick little movie. It's about 3 minutes long. I show this as often as I can. If you've been to 4 or 5 of my lectures, you've seen this 4 or 5 times. The reason I show this is because it shows the complexity of the interactions of the molecules in the body. I'll try and explain a few things as we go along. That green stuff, that's the cell membrane. And those things that are moving are proteins and receptors. This is all inside a single cell. When we need to move things, we make little filaments, and we have little molecules that carry things we need around in filaments. This is a tubule, microtubule, and when we need them, we build them, and we don't need them, we take them apart. And we use them as transport pathways. This thing is just a protein without a brain. And the bag it's carrying are proteins that were made in the nucleus or inside the cell, and they're being carried to the surface. That's a strand of RNA. And that is a protein being created. That's a strand of RNA being read. It's like a little zipper that has coding on it. There's one of these molecules to carry things from the cell center to the surface, and there's a different one that carries it from the surface to the center of the cell. That's a receptor. Receptors read information from the environment. That's a white blood cell, and those are red blood cells. Okay, so there's the cell membrane. I don't know if you got this, but there's a lot of dynamics going on inside the cell, and having the right molecules in there and enough of them is very important. So do we have to worry about nutrients? I get this question all the time. If I don't I get all the nutrients I need for my food? So I'm just going to kind of lay it out and tell you, no. I have yet to see someone do life without supplements and still be healthy. I've seen a lot of people got really close. I got a couple of people with potential. I still have to wait a couple of years to see if they have B12 deficiency, but I've never seen anybody do it. And there's a couple of reasons why. There's less nutrients in the soil now. It amazes me when I drive up the 400 and I see the farms, and the guys are farming, and they have their rows going downhill. So every time it rains, the soil gets washed away. You would think, they knew it 1,000, 2,000 years ago how to plant their fields, but we don't do it. You would think we would cut on by now. So every time we plant, we lose nutrients. Right, we don't return plant matter to the soil. You know how when you go and you buy your, say, a cob of corn, you eat the corn, you throw it in the compost? How much of that compost goes back to the farm where it came from? None of it. So the soil provides the nutrients for the plants, and then the plants grow the fruit and produce or whatever, and then the remainder is supposed to go back in the soil, but it doesn't. And it gets replaced with artificial fertilizers that have 3 nutrients in them.
NPK.
Yes, NPK. So what happens? We end up with soil depletion. And here's some news for you. If the food looks good, it doesn't matter. If it's not in the soil, it will not be in the food. So that's one of the big things. Check this out. Between 1940 and 1991, check out the differences of minerals in fruit and vegetables. I'm going to skip sodium for a second. Let's look at potassium. There's less potassium and there's less potassium in vegetables and less in zinc. Magnesium, there's 24% less, almost a quarter less in vegetables. And calcium, there's almost half the amount of calcium in vegetables as there was in 1940. By the way, our best source of calcium is not dairy products, it's actually from plant material. So this is kind of disturbing. Iron, we have a big problem with people being deficient in iron, apparently. A lot of people are concerned about it, 27% less now than there was 50 years ago. And copper is less, and zinc is hugely important. I'm going to talk about that one specifically. Almost 60% less zinc in foods now than there was 50 years ago. So where are we making that up? We still have the same requirements. Actually, we have more requirements, but we still have the same requirements, but it's not in the foods anymore. This is the mineral content compared to 1941. So of today, everything is less, and less. I'll leave it at that. So We're not making this up. We do have the stats that prove there's actually less nutrients in the food than there was before. Now, what are we actually getting? So we look at, this is the amount of minerals that, or vitamins and minerals that people are getting. The EAR is the estimated average requirement, so how much people need. And if you look at iron, menstruating women are getting about 16% of the iron they need from foods. So if you look at magnesium, by the way, magnesium, #1 anti-stress mineral, we get only 56% comes from food. So almost half the magnesium we need is absent. And I saw that on the highway coming here. Stressed out people with their horns. Zinc, hugely, hugely important nutrient. One of the key nutrients tied to anorexia and the onset of anorexia. You can't digest without zinc. Can't use your brain without zinc. We're only getting about 12% from our foods. And let me just go, folic acid or folate. Adult women are only getting about 16% from their foods. And vitamin E, we're not doing too bad, but we're not getting all of it. And then vitamin C. You know, I hear people going, I ask them if they get vitamin C, and they go, yeah, I had an orange today. Well, orange provides virtually nothing as far as the amount we need, especially if it's been shipped over and it has been sitting in the store for a couple of weeks. There'll be virtually no vitamin C left. And that shows in the numbers. About 31% of our vitamin C comes from foods. On top of that, our need for nutrients has gone up. #1 reason is stress. Come on, somebody laugh, geez. So stress. Stress has gone through the roof, and stress depletes nutrients. We need to make hormones to manage stress, and those have to be made of nutrients. We got lots of toxins. I do an entire workshop on toxins and how to detox them, and I'm not going to go through it there, but I'm going to give you a core chunk of this right now. So where do we get our toxins from? According to Health Canada, this is acceptable, that there are traces of pesticides on this many vegetables if you go to the store. About 10% of all veggies have traces of pesticides on them that are above the recommended amount. We get toxins from our fresh fruit and vegetables in the form of pesticides. We get hormones in the form of dairy, hormones in the meat. If it's fish and it's factory farmed, there's going to be lots of residues and hormones in there. And there's also the whole mercury issue with eating too much fish of the wrong types. When we look at prepared artificial foods, they are loaded with additives and preservatives. None of those go up to make the molecules that make up the body. So you'll find none of the additives and preservatives working properly in that movie I showed you. There's just no spot for them. So what's allowed? I got this from Health Canada website. I just loaded some pages. These are the lists of things that, I'm going to call them food manufacturers, are allowed to put in foods. So this is the list. And these are all chemicals. There's a few natural ingredients in there. This is what goes in the average strawberry flavor. So you get strawberry ice cream. This is the chemical composition of strawberry flavor. There's actually one natural ingredient there. I think it's rose, but that's it. So that's what you're getting. We also get toxins every time we fry food, every time we barbecue. We put stuff in plastic. We let it come in contact with aluminum or Teflon. When we fry things at high temperatures, we bake things at high temperatures, and we pack it in plastics, especially the flexible ones that are opaque. All of those give us toxins in with our food. We get toxins from cosmetics, artificial dyes, colors, all that kind of stuff. Of the 200 ingredients that the Environmental Protection Agency tested in the 1970s that were in fragrances, 80% of them came back as cancer-causing agents. So every time you put perfume on, artificial stuff, you are getting cancer-causing agents more than likely. Even our toothpaste is high in fluoride, detergents. Anytime you get a fragrance, any type of fragrance, you're getting chemicals in. It doesn't stop there. We have chemicals in our garages. We put them on our lawns. We wash our cars, all that kind of stuff. We build our houses full of chemical-laden stuff. And the air gets chemicals from pesticides, industrial processes, all that kind of stuff. Even driving down the highway. Do you know that For some people, getting a good strong whiff of diesel exhaust will induce a heart attack. So why? Because it sets off an inflammatory process, and that's that. So all of these things are extra chemicals we did not have 60, 70 years ago. They did not exist. So every single toxin molecule needs to be detoxified, and every time you detoxify a molecule, you require a nutrient to do that job. So we need more nutrients now than ever. Now the other thing is we don't have enough of the right molecules, so we can take in proper nutrients, but if we don't have enough of them, the body is going to be lacking the tools it needs to do its jobs. And guess what? If you don't have enough calcium, your body still needs to build bone, and there happens to be lead in the environment, it will use the lead instead. So having enough of the right molecules helps us not uptake the bad ones. So having not enough molecules and increased needs leads to things, initially minor symptoms, then we get general poor health, then we end up with disease states, and ultimately we end up with death, and that is what's going on in our society and culture now. So let's talk about optimal nutrition. So what's optimal nutrition? That is making sure you have the right molecules, the right nutrients to do all the jobs the body needs to do and offset exposures to toxins and things like that. And we're also looking at a bit of a preventative component there as well. So that's optimal nutrition, and I just basically said that. Growth, maintenance, and repair, we need the tools to do that, and prevent incorporation of toxic molecules. This is a little diagram of the metabolic pathways in the body. It's actually not all of them. I thought it was all of them. I'm thinking, cool, maybe sometime in my lifetime I'll track them all down, but no, it's not all of them. That is run by 40 nutrients, essentially. So there are 40 things that do all of this. These are all nutrients. And these are all nutrients we need to have. If you don't get any one of those, you will simply die because 40 things show up an awful lot of places on that chart, all in the metabolic reactions of the body. So how do we get optimal nutrition? I'm going to give you a little summary right now, and then I'm going to go a little deeper. Optimal nutrition, we need good food and cooked properly, so not baked to death. Proper proportions of protein, fats, and carbohydrates. Nutrient-rich foods as opposed to nutrient-poor foods. So nutrient-rich food would be something like a sweet potato, and a poor food would be a slice of white bread. And I do believe we need supplements to actually round off that as well. Vitamins are depleted by light, air, and time. So anytime you have something with vitamins in it, if you expose it to light, you leave it in the sun all day, you're going to deplete it. If it's exposed to air, or if it takes 6 weeks to get from the tree to your dinner table, then there's going to be depletion of vitamins. Anytime you process a food, you grind it up or you bake it, you'll lose vitamins, and you actually will deplete by cooking. But there's always a but here. Some nutrients are actually liberated by cooking. So if you have a sweet potato, you'll actually get a little more nutrient quality out of it if you cook it. You don't have to bake it, but if you cook it or steam it, you'll get more. And there are nutrients, or there are foods out there that you actually get a little more nutrients out of if you cook it. So I don't do 100% raw because I know certain foods require some cooking. Minerals are depleted by processing. So every time you process a mineral, or a food with a mineral in it, they can be lost, and when you cook in water. So here's a little test. If you got a sweet potato and it has, say, magnesium in it, and you bake it, do you lose magnesium? No. Do you destroy the magnesium? No. No, you can't destroy minerals because they're basically what make rock up. You can destroy vitamins, but you can't destroy minerals. So as long as you don't cook it in water and wash away, basically dissolve the minerals and flush them out, the minerals will mostly be retained.
But how about you drink that water? How about you drink the water?
Yeah, if you drink that water, then you get the minerals back, yes. This is a quick estimate of how you should build your meals. You have a protein part that's not too big. It's about 3.5 ounces, 3 to 4 ounces of protein if we're talking animal products. Starch is a very small component. So a lot of people eat way too much starch. And I'm just going to give you a quick nutshell for estimating how much you need. If you're doing grains or pasta, it is about 3/4 of a cup. So 3/4 of a cup you could fit in your hand like this. Any more than that, you're going to spike your blood sugar. If you're doing bread, it's 1 slice of bread. If you're going to do a Snickers bar, It's 1/4 of a Snickers bar, and anything above that spikes your blood sugar. So we do not need a lot of starches. One of the things we do need, oh no, oh, I just tipped off what's happening next. We need a lot of green vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, actually not green, all different colors of vegetables. So the two key things we need to look at are this and this. So the protein and non-starchy vegetables. And when we talk about starches, we look at how little, keeping it down, how much can we not have. Now they are required, some people will say, and the evidence is still a little wishy-washy going back and forth. Starches do have a lot of good properties, but getting too much sets us up for disease. We should get a good fat in our diet too. And I'm going to talk about fats. Good fats are butter, olive oil, walnut oil, sesame oil, those kind of things, and flax oil, those kind of things, and raw nuts and seeds. So that would give us a balanced diet. Now we're going to talk about what to do. And so we're going to talk about the most important nutrients for optimal health. Where does this come from? I do a lot of research, an awful lot of research. I do a lot of research with clients because I have clients from everything from acne to advanced end-stage cancer. A lot of research required there, and over the years, I have read a lot of stuff. I also, every year, I'm a member of the Canadian Society for Orthomolecular Medicine, and every year I attend their annual conference where the best research on nutrition and orthomolecular medicine is presented. And then I go and turn that around and I do a special highlights program just for nutritionists. In order to do that, I have to do a lot of research and I have to do a lot of understanding. And when I do all this, some things start to become obvious. And they come up over and over again, and that's what I'm going to be presenting. That's where this information comes from. So there's certain things we need. We need air. Nobody's going to deny that one, right? I mean, you can stop, hold your breath to prove me wrong, but after 2 or 3 minutes, I'll be right. So everybody needs air. We also need water, and about 2 liters a day. Some people will say no, but that's what the evidence shows, about 2 liters a day for normal, healthy people. We actually need salt, and this one's bizarre. One of the speakers at this last conference was talking about mineral uptake, and it turns out that you need salt for proper sodium-potassium balance, which regulates the way water goes through the cell membrane. You don't have enough salt in your body, the membrane doesn't work, and you don't uptake other minerals. So it's absolutely vital that you get salt. And what he says is about a 1/4 teaspoon a day of sea salt. Not table salt, because that will mess you up, but sea salt has the right proportions. We actually, if we look at anthropology, came out of the ocean and encapsulated seawater, and that's what the composition of our blood mimics, is seawater. So sea salt will definitely support that. Protein, carbohydrates, and fats, we need all of those. We need large quantities of those, and we need them in the right proportions. We also need probiotics, which is the good bacteria. We used to get our good bacteria from the foods we ate. They would actually be on the soil that would be on the food that we ate. When we ate the food, we actually get a little trace residues of the bacteria that was in the soil, and everything was good. Now, when you spray pesticides, you kill all those bacteria, so there's virtually no probiotics in the foods we eat. And then if you cook them all the time, you don't get them anyway. So probiotics, we need them. Good bacteria. Has anybody not heard of probiotics? All right. So they're just good bacteria. So acidophilus and bifidum and those types, usually we use blends. So you actually, I recommend every day, every second day, you take a supplement of probiotics, and then daily you eat some kind of food with probiotics in it, like yogurt, not a lot though, fermented vegetables, sauerkraut. All of these have to be unpasteurized. Miso, like miso soup, is a good source as well. Probiotics actually line our digestive tract and do a lot of roles for us. One of them is they act as our first line of defense when it comes to bad bacteria. They crowd out the bad guys, so they occupy real estate in our intestinal lining, and then they actually attack and destroy bad guys. Anytime you get a bacterial stomach thing, it means your good guys have been overwhelmed by bad guys. Probiotics, good bacteria actually make some vitamins for us, and they actually do up to 50% of detoxification of toxins coming into the body through foods. 50% of that is done by our good bacteria. Our probiotics are also our first line of defense for the immune system. So up to 50% of our immunity lies in our good bacteria. So these are guys we really want to make sure we have in good quantities. The other thing is fiber. There's two types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. Insoluble doesn't dissolve in water and it acts like a sponge and scrapes stuff up and moves things out of the body. And the soluble dissolves in water and it feeds our good bacteria. So that would round out the big things we need to have for nutrition. I'm going to look at the smaller things, so the micronutrients, and I grouped them in a different way than you would probably normally see. I'm going to start with the antioxidants. Anybody know what an antioxidant is? Anybody heard of an antioxidant? Yeah, has anybody not heard of an antioxidant? Okay, so interesting, everybody's heard of them, but nobody knows how to explain it. I had to look it up myself when I taught this course. I'd heard of it, but couldn't explain it. What are antioxidants? They are, well, first I'm going to talk about free radicals. Free radicals are molecules that are missing an electron. So if you look at hydrogen, you're going to have a proton and an electron, and this would never happen in nature as far as the body's concerned, but we'd have a proton which is positive, an electron which is negative, and when you put the two together, you have a balanced charge. If you take away the electron, now we're suddenly massively positive. Does everybody get that? Now, nature doesn't like a massively positive molecule, so that thing is going to zip around at light speed and try to steal an electron from another molecule. And it will go and it'll grab electrons from other tissues and other cells and other enzymes and things like that, so they don't work as well. And it can actually zip through DNA strands and cut them. And if you cut your DNA strand, the next time you go to use it, it doesn't work right, and that leads to mutations and things like that. So free radicals aren't good. Antioxidants, on the other hand, are larger molecules that have enough electrons that they can donate a few of their electrons to the free radicals without becoming massively positive. So this would never happen, but I'm just saying, say we had this 4 electron molecule and we gave away one, it would only be 3/4 as positive, or only 1/4 positive. Does that make sense? Because it still has 3 electrons. So it loses a little bit, or becomes a little more positive, but not enough to be damaging. So that's what antioxidants do. Where do free radicals come from? Smoke, chemicals, food additives, toxic metals, radiation, and exercise. So everybody stop exercising. Just kidding. Yes. Right. Exercise generates free radicals. But we have a system to manage that. We have a whole bunch of these guys. That's one of the roles of antioxidants. So we know exercise is highly beneficial, so don't stop on account of that. Where do the antioxidants come from? Vitamin A, C, E, zinc, selenium. There's a few other ones, but these are the main ones. We actually make 2 antioxidants in the body, glutathione peroxidase and superoxide dismutase, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. So the key antioxidants we get from foods are vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin C, and beta-carotene and the carotene family. So vitamin A, we need it to make mucosal membranes. So anywhere where you have saliva or fluid on your body, vitamin A is required to keep that membrane healthy. So one of the ways I can tell if somebody has vitamin A deficiency is, do they get upper respiratory tract infections, sinus stuff, eye stuff, do they have poor night vision? All of those things are tied to low vitamin A. We require vitamin A for growth and healing. So if you don't get enough vitamin A, and you cannot repair tissue damage. And we need it for eyesight. You can't see in the dark without vitamin A. And immunity, very, very important for the immune system. So where does vitamin A come from? Animal products only. You cannot get vitamin A from vegetables or plant kingdom. Now, if you go and buy something and it says vitamin A, and it's a plant, something, let's say, what would be a good example? Let's say a loaf of bread. And you look and it says vitamin A, it's not going to be vitamin A, it's going to be beta-carotene. It will actually say vitamin A as beta-carotene or provitamin A. What happens is beta-carotene gets converted to vitamin A. So why is this important? Because if you actually need to do these things, beta-carotene won't do it. You have to have animal sources. Where does it come from? So that's the animal products. And fish liver oils are really, really high in vitamin A, or they actually give us a proper dose of it. One of the best fish liver oils would be cod liver oil, and that's why it's been used for decades, maybe hundreds of years. So every single cell has that membrane, and it's made of fatty acids, 80% fatty acids, and vitamin E protects those. So basically you could say vitamin E protects 80% of the body. Reduces cancer risk. We know that from clinical studies. and reduces cardiovascular disease and strokes. In spite of what some of our recent studies have said about vitamin E not working or making it worse, if you look at those studies, you'll see that they're flawed and probably on purpose. Maybe on purpose. I'm quoting somebody I'm not going to get into. Okay, so vitamin E, we know there are hundreds of studies that show vitamin E is protective in cardiovascular disease. Where does it come from? Butter, eggs, fatty fish like salmon. Remember, anywhere where there's fat, vitamin E will naturally be there to protect it. Nuts and seeds and whole grains are good sources as well. Here's a study that talks about alpha tocopherol is vitamin E and beta carotene and cancer prevention study. So they looked at 29,000 Finnish men for 19 years. Those who had the highest vitamin E in their blood had lower total mortality, so less deaths, and lower cardiovascular disease. Vitamin C, it's antibacterial, antifungal, it's antiviral, you need to make collagen, it's antihistamine, anti-inflammatory, you need it for proper detoxification, it reduces stress, and it's on its own, it's anti-cancer. So this is probably my all-time favorite nutrient whatsoever. Somebody asked me if I only had enough resources to do one thing, what would it be? Hands down, vitamin C. Where does it come from? From fresh fruit and vegetables. Then, from what I've seen from the research, we do not get enough from fruit and vegetables. Okay, so there's antioxidants that are made by the body, glutathione and superoxide dismutase. Look what they're made of. So the body will take these nutrients in, vitamin C, zinc, selenium, cysteine, which is from protein, it's an amino acid, and alpha lipoic acid, which comes from some fruit, vegetables, and animal products. So we actually have to assemble this, and it's our number one protective antioxidant that keeps us healthy. So we need all of those things. And superoxide dismutase is another one. We need zinc, copper, and manganese. So you need to be able to get your minerals and get them in, or you need to have your minerals in there to actually make those ones. So that's the antioxidants. The fatty acids, a lot of people don't say optimal nutrition, you got to get your fat in, but absolutely you do. It's going to give you a quick overview of fatty acids. We have what are called saturated, unsaturated, and EFAs. Those are the terms that come around most often. The omega-6 is actually linoleic acid would be the essential one, and alpha linoleic acid would be the essential omega-3 fatty acid. We also hear about EPA and DHA. So I'm going to talk about those guys. These are some of the saturated fatty acids. And I'm showing this so you can see what a saturated fatty acid is. And basically, these are all little carbon molecules, and attached to every carbon, there's a hydrogen molecule, and we just build a chain that's saturated. We can make it longer and shorter, and that would be the saturated fatty acids. The unsaturated fatty acids actually have little holes. So they have spaces where they're unsaturated. Some of these carbons are unsaturated, and that's what an unsaturated fatty acid is. The omega-6, everybody's heard of omega-6 fatty acids? Yes? All right, good. What's an omega-6? It means you get one of these chains and you count the carbons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and where the first space starts, if it's at the 6th carbon, that's an omega-6. If it starts at the 3rd carbon, it's an omega-3. So now you know what the difference is between omega-6 and omega-3. Now EPA and DHA look like this. They're long, unsaturated fatty acids, and they're actually made from this one by little enzymes. Okay, so why do we care about fatty acids? So there's the cell. This is from the anatomy book that you'll be looking at. And this is called the standardized cell. It has all the components that most cells would have in it. And there's a wrapper around here. And that little wrapper looks like this. And these are all those little guys we saw in the movie. These are receptors and gateways. And then the actual membrane itself is made of protein and fatty acids. And so that's outside the cell and that's inside the cell. So there we have the proteins and there we have the fatty acids. So what's really important is the composition of this membrane. And so about 50% of it is saturated fatty acids. It has to be, because every one of these molecules, I'm going to draw it here. Every one of these molecules has a saturated fatty acid and an unsaturated, but there's always a saturated. So we need at least 50% of saturated fatty acids. So what happens when you go on a low saturated fat diet? You can't make these guys properly. And so this membrane starts to have problems. Now the other thing is we have the essential fatty acids, the omega-6 and the omega-3s, make up a large chunk of the rest of it. Now one of the properties of those molecules with the missing hydrogens is that they draw oxygen into the cell. Those little gaps actually draw oxygen in. They act like little snorkels that pull oxygen in. So in order to keep oxygen going into the cell properly, we need to have half of our cell membranes need to be unsaturated. And we need a small amount to be the EPA and DHA because they're anti-inflammatory and really good for brain function, among other things. So the role of the EFAs, so EFAs means essential fatty acids, means we cannot make them in the body. We have to get them in from foods. And so oxygen transfer, we use it to make membranes. They make the membrane fluid, so it's not rigid, so things that come in and out nicely. We actually turn them into little hormone-like messengers that signal what's going on so the body understands and can adapt to its environment. We need to make hemoglobin so we can carry blood. We need it for proper cell division and making DNA. And we also need it to run all aspects of neurotransmitters. So if you want a healthy brain, you want to think properly and clearly, you need to have essential fatty acids. So there's a little diagram of that membrane. The saturated look like this, and the unsaturated look like that. And you see how they take a little more space? They take a little more space, and there's a little more gaps, and that allows for that fluidity. The brain is 60% fat, so we need all kinds of fat to make brain. If you take fat levels down, you get an increase in homicide, violence, aggression, and suicide. How many people knew that? And so all these low fat diets have been leading to this. What happens when you take studies, you increase the fat in proper fats in prison populations, violence goes down. So where do we get our food sources? The omega-6 is from nut seeds and their oils. And the omega-3s is from flaxseed, chia seeds, and walnuts. So that's where you get those guys. Sources of EPA and DHA come from cold water fish, salmon, herring, halibut, and sardines. Okay, so that's the fatty acids. Another one you probably never heard of are methyl donators. These guys, this is a methyl group. It's a carbon and 3 hydrogens. And why do we care about that? Because we do 20,000 methylations, so that means we stick a methyl group onto things. We do 20,000 of those reactions per second per cell. That's a lot of activity. And if we don't have those guys, we don't do it properly. So the main roles of methyl groups, homocysteine recycling. Homocysteine is a molecule that it's derived from methionine, which is an amino acid. We use it in the body, and then it gets changed into homocysteine, which is actually toxic to the brain, and it's toxic to our arteries. One of the big causes of cardiovascular disease is high homocysteine levels. If we go and take that homocysteine and stick a methyl group on top, it becomes non-harmful. So we actually deactivate it. We need methyl groups to do DNA and RNA transcription and epigenetic modulation. So that's a big fancy word for, we take our genes and we change the way they're expressed. I'm going to tell you about the rat study. There was a study done where they took these rats, and you can get these rats, they're called agouti rats, and you can order them and have them shipped anywhere in the world, and they're genetically identical. And so that's why they're used in these studies. So at one point, the graduate student wanted to do a study called hypermethylating pregnant rats. So basically what they did, one of the big ways you get methyl groups is through folic acid. They gave the pregnant rats lots of folic acid. And what happened was quite startling. The mother rats are white fur all the time. They're large, they eat a lot, and they're prone to cardiovascular disease, and they die quickly. When the babies were born, they came out with brown fur. Nobody had ever seen this before. They came out with brown fur. And over time, they did not eat a lot, they didn't get cardiovascular disease, and they lived several times longer than their parents. So what happened? They looked at the blood, and the genes were identical, but the expression of the genes was different. So when you have methyl groups, you can change the way you express your genes. So it's kind of like you have your big gene here, and you read your blueprint to see what's going to happen. And you have some genes that cause cancer and some that prevent cancer. You can actually go and paperclip your pro-cancer genes with methyl groups. so that they don't get red. And you can post-it note the anti-cancer genes so they get preferentially red. So methyl group's hugely important. All right, so we also need them for the brain. We need them to make neurotransmitters, to break down neurotransmitters, and to keep the proper balance of neurotransmitters. We need them to build nerve cells and protect the brain from damage. So where do we get methyl donators? Folic acid, vitamin B12, and choline. Those are the big ones. I got to give you a little note on B12. It's just an aside here. In addition to the methyl donation group, vitamin B12 you need for brain function, and we know that if people are low in vitamin B12 get dementia, depression, things like that, get damage to the neurons and the nerves. And I'm going to stop there for a second. Folic acid is, or hold on, B12 is it takes a long time to deplete it. So you can have low B12 in your diet, not be getting it in, and it takes years to deplete it. And then you start to get these subtle signs like nervous tics and tingling in your fingers and anxiety and depression. And if you don't correct it at that and you keep going, you end up with permanent brain damage. So vitamin B12, hugely, hugely important. Now the other thing is it's required for the folic acid cycle. I'm going to show you a nice little simple chart here. It's one of my favorites. This shows the folic acid cycle. We have 2 or 3 little cycles that are all interrelated. This one, you take folic acid and you make homocysteine, and then it gets converted back to methionine with B12 here. And we do the methylation of DNA and RNA and the proteins and all that kind of stuff. On this side, we make, where is it? We make serotonin and dopamine. Those are feel-good, calm, and blissful neurotransmitters. So we have that side and we have that side, and in the middle we have B12 being required to be able to do that. So we don't get B12, we can't run these cycles, and it affects many, many, many functions in the body. Okay, so why am I talking about this? I'm going to talk about food sources of methyl donators first: beans, legumes, dark leafy green vegetables, and animal products. That's where we get those. Beans and legumes should be on everybody's menu at least 4 or 5 times a week. Dark leafy green vegetables every day. Animal products, less so. Now for vitamin B12, it only comes from animal products. You cannot get it anywhere else. There are some algae that if you properly process them, condense them down, you will be able to get some B12 out of it. Why can you get B12 out of an algae? Because it's half animal. Now all these vegans have a quandary. If you are not eating meat and getting a good source of maybe some algae that you know is a good source of B12, you must supplement it or you risk brain damage down the road. Vitamin D. Vitamin D has been in the press a lot lately, in the last couple years, and I'll just give you a reason why. Everybody knows about vitamin D and calcium metabolism. You need it for good, healthy bones, right? Everybody know that you need it for mood regulation, prevents anxiety, depression, other mental disorders, and you need it for immunity. Highly, highly important for the immune system. A lot of the researchers now, the researchers are saying that, you know, the flu is more than likely just a vitamin D deficiency. If you had enough vitamin D, you would not get the flu. Where does vitamin D come from? We make it in the skin. So there's 2 ways to get it. We can either get it from food or we make it in the skin. So to make it in the skin, you take your cell membrane with all those little bubbles and the fatty acids, and in between there is going to be cholesterol molecules. Now you got cholesterol in your skin, the sun shines on it, and it's the UVB rays, and then it converts it to a precursor to the vitamin D hormone. That goes to the liver, and then the liver changes it, and then it goes to the kidneys, and then it gets changed into vitamin D, the hormone, that has all the beneficial effects. So we either get the sun or we get it from food. Now here's the funny thing about the sun. In the wintertime, if we live north of that red line, anybody who lives above that cannot make enough vitamin D from their sun. It's not enough intensity of the rays. So you must get it from your food or supplement if you live above that line. And we're right here. So check out this. Reduction in deaths with more vitamin D estimated for Canada in 2005. There's 42 milligrams per milliliter. Yeah, 105 nanomoles per liter. That's the Canadian number. Percent deaths reduction. Cardiovascular disease. So if everybody got their vitamin D at the right level, 25% of cardiovascular disease would disappear. 25% of cancer would disappear. So I don't know who's out there raising money today for cancer. I've seen a lot of runs going on and stuff to find the cure. But 25% of it could go away in the next couple of years if we had enough vitamin D. Diabetes requires vitamin D, lower respiratory tract stuff, dementia. Vitamin D is pretty important. Yet 1/3 of Canadian toddlers are deficient in vitamin D. So vitamin D reduces cancer, at least 18 types. This is the evidence shows. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, types 1 and 2. Bacterial and viral infections, autoimmune diseases where the body attacks and destroys itself. Multiple sclerosis, things like that. Falls and fractures, dental caries, and periodontal disease are tied to its role for calcium metabolism. Vitamin D decreases all cancer risk by 60%. 78% if you take it for more than 1 year. And this is my favorite quote from the conference. In BC alone, you could decrease cancer by 12,000 people per year just by ensuring people had enough vitamin D. 12,000 people per year in one province in Canada. It's not even as populated as Ontario. So why aren't we doing that? Mortality increased by 17%. Here's a little chart I found in my travels. This compares melanoma, so skin cancer, to introduction of sunscreens. So here we have the sunscreens introduced in the 40s, and skin cancer continues to rise. Then we add another sunscreen, it continues to rise. We add another one, it continues to rise, and it keeps rising. The sunscreens were actually the cure. If sun was bad, we would expect to see this stop once we introduce sunscreens, and yet it doesn't. Here's a bit of the answer, I think. This compares sales of sunscreens versus skin cancer. And you can see the more sunscreen you sell, the more skin cancer you get. So, okay, I gotta just back up a second here. So does it mean you never wear sunscreen? No, because a tan is good for you and getting sun is good for you, but burning is not good. So if I were to fly down to the Caribbean tomorrow and go into the blazing sun, my skin wouldn't be able to take it. For the first day or two, I would use sunscreen. After that, I would not. Hey, by the way, why do you feel good after you've been down in the Caribbean for 2 weeks? Or in Greece?
You got enough vitamin D.
Right, you achieved optimal levels of vitamin D for 2 weeks. That's why people feel so good. A little bit of the relaxation and partying too, but even people who don't do that, they still feel a lot better when they come back, and it's because of vitamin D dose. Here's the requirements. The US RDA, 400 IU for adults and 200 IU for children. The Pediatricians Society, the American, I forget what, Association of Pediatricians say 400 IU for children, 600 for elderly, and the Linus Pauling Institute, who does a lot of research and is evidence-based, say 2,000 IU per person for adults. Now in Europe, up until about the 60s, it was routine to give infants 2,000 IU vitamin D for the first 2 years. So the levels we are at now are really low. And if you want to go out in the sun and make your vitamin D, it is 10 minutes in a very skimpy bathing suit in full sun in June and July and August. That's what you do. So here's the question. Today, how many of you will achieve that amount of vitamin D from the sun? Nobody. And it's supposed to rain tomorrow. We'll get done. Where does vitamin D come from? The best food sources is cod liver oil, salmon, and the oily fish, basically. Anything else, like the milk and dairy products, most of it will be fortified with vitamin D, and a lot of times it's not vitamin D3, it's vitamin D2, which does not have the same metabolic effect in the body. And that's basically it. You can get some in eggs and some in cheese. And so that's vitamin D. So the recap, fish liver oils, oily fish, egg, milk, and cheese are your best sources. Zinc. Zinc is hugely, hugely important, and most people are deficient. The digestive system, you cannot make hydrochloric acid without zinc, and you cannot make most of the enzymes that we use for digestion without zinc. So if you're low on zinc, your digestion starts to go. We need it for brain function, to make neurotransmitters and enzymes. You can't reproduce So why do we have such an epidemic of infertility now? The other thing is it's an antioxidant, so it's tied to that SOD molecule that the body makes. Food sources, animal foods, oysters, red meat, herring, and eggs. There's some in whole grains, legumes, and pumpkin seeds is an excellent source of zinc. You need about 2 tablespoons a day, if that's your sole source. Magnesium, my all-time favorite mineral. Here's why: it keeps calcium in solution. See, calcium is this mineral that we need, but if we get too much of it and we can't process it properly, it precipitates into calcium stones, it gets into the cell tissue, and makes kidney stones and things like that, and bone spurs. So we don't want that. Nature has always put calcium together with magnesium. So if we have magnesium, it keeps calcium from precipitating out. Oh, by the way, on my list here, you're not even going to see calcium because the new evidence is starting to see that it's nowhere near as important as we have been made out to believe. However, if you do take calcium, do not ever take calcium without magnesium. You will upset the balance over the long term. So always look for a ratio of 2 to 1, 2 parts calcium, 1 part magnesium, or 1 to 1, 1 part calcium, 1 part magnesium. Magnesium is a muscle relaxant. So it relaxes that stress in the neck and shoulders, which tells you you're stressed. That makes your muscles more tense. Anytime anybody has any cramping, muscle cramping, or any type of cramping, like leg muscles, arm muscles, or anywhere else, you want to look at magnesium. And magnesium is required to support the adrenals. Adrenals are our anti-stress organ, and they use lots and lots of magnesium. If you run out, you just get more and more stress. So where does magnesium come from? Dark leafy green veggies, nuts and seeds, beans, soy. I only recommend fermented soy, whole grains, avocado, and seafoods. So we got lots of good sources from it, but we probably don't get anywhere near the amount we need considering the stressful environment we live in. Iodine, this is the most recent one I've been exposed to as far as how important it is, and I find it quite exciting. But that's me, nutritionist. Excited about minerals. So iodine, required by every cell in the body. So every single cell in the body requires iodine. Endocrine tissues require more iodine than other cells. If an endocrine tissue, like the thyroid or the adrenals or reproductive organs, are going to work properly, they need lots of iodine. The other thing is iodine prevents mental retardation and deficiencies tied to ADD and ADHD, and we need iodine for the immune system. So iodine deficiency is a worldwide problem. Mental impairment, decreased IQ. By the way, people who supplement with proper doses of iodine have about 7 to 8% higher IQs than other people. Goiter is when the thyroid gets enlarged, and basically it gets enlarged because it needs to be better at trapping iodine. Infertility is tied to iodine deficiency. Increased risk of breast, ovarian, endometrial, prostate, and other cancers due to iodine deficiency. World Health Organization says iodine is the biggest single cause of preventable mental retardation. 300 million school-aged children on the planet do not get enough iodine. 72% of the population of this planet don't get enough iodine. Why? It's not in the soil. It's normally in the soil, but depending where you live, like the whole Great Lakes Basin here, this used to be a glacial watershed. So the water would come out and wash the iodine out of the soil. So everything around Lake Ontario and the Great Lakes is deficient in iodine, and the Midwest, the United States. So it's not in the soil. We're told not to do salt, and iodine's high in natural salt. It's added to sea salt, or it's added to regular salt. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But if you limit your salt, you're going to limit your iodine. And there's competition for uptake and use of iodine. This is a periodic table, and I'm going to point out iodine here. So here's iodine. Anything that's in the same line looks similar to the body. So iodine's there. Anything above it looks similar to the body, and the body will use it interchangeably. Or if you get the other stuff, iodine won't get in. So it's basically they're all competing for the same use or same access. So what's competing? Fluoride. If you use fluoride toothpaste, you are bumping out your iodine. Fluoride is also in pesticides, and it's used in a bunch of industrial processes. Next one's chlorine. Anybody drink chlorine every day?
Water.
Yeah, it's in the water. and you shower in it and you uptake it. So yes, the chlorine will be competing for competition, or competing for uptake with the iodine. And here's the surprise one, bromine. What's bromine? Well, it's another one of these molecules called the halides. Where do we get bromine? Pesticides. 80% of new car smell is bromine. It's in a lot of industrial stuff. Where else do we get it? We put it in foods. If anybody gets some those fruit drinks that are fruit drinks, or put fruit drinks, where it's kind of looks like orange juice, but there's no orange juice in it, but it's got that cloudy texture, well, that's brominated vegetable oil. It makes it look like a fruit juice, but it's made from bromine. I believe it's also in soda pops and things like that. So colas. So we get lots and lots of bromine. Oh, wait, it's also a fire retardant. So we are mandated in Canada that all our kids' bedding needs to have fire retardant in it. So now they get to sleep on a source of bromine every night. Okay, so all of those compete. Oh, and by the way, iodine used to be put in bread because if you put it in salt, you match it with the number one competitor, or one of the close competitors, chlorine. Chlorine and iodine together means they both compete for uptake. So you only get about 10% of the iodine out of salt. If you put it in bread, which they used to do, you get about 70% uptake, which means one slice of bread would give you your daily allowance. Well, about 10 years ago, they pulled iodine out and they put bromine in, thereby pretty much guaranteeing health problems from this point on. Now, the speaker who talked about this, Dr. Brownstein, expert on iodine, he says it's highly suspicious that they would do this. And I'm not going to get into why, but there you go. That's another, completely another session. Okay, things that can be treated with iodine: ADD, asthma, atherosclerosis, breast disease. If somebody's got breast cancer, you definitely want to look at iodine. All cancers, diabetes. Iodine cuts mucus, so people have a lot of mucus. Iodine cuts that. High blood pressure, infections, what do we got there? Cysts, and a whole bunch of other things. Thyroid disorders, all of those. So where do we get iodine? Good sources: sea salt, sea veggies, and fish. There's smaller amounts in eggs, beans, peas, meat, and poultry, provided the stuff they were eating or the soil it was grown on had iodine in it. Which brings me to calcium. I already told you I'm not talking about calcium. We do need calcium because it does do a lot of metabolic processes. We probably don't need more than 1,000 milligrams a day, probably less, if we do it in a proper formula with magnesium and other minerals, and we have enough stomach acid to be able to digest it properly. This is not something, if somebody asked me, what are the top 5 things I need to do? Calcium would not be on that list.